Let me ask you guys a question. Do you guys believe that Mike Tomlin deserves more criticism for the Pittsburgh Steelers' lack of success in the postseason? I was reading an article by Mark Madden. He was giving his thoughts on Mike Tomlin's recent interview with the Pivot podcast. And if you guys haven't seen this podcast, make sure that you guys go ahead and check it out. It is an awesome interview, a great listen. And basically, Mark Madden was saying that Mike Tomlin has a lot of respect in the NFL world. Many people view him as a great coach. However, Mark Madden feels that Mike Tomlin isn't a great coach and that he's not even a top 5 coach due to the lack of success that he has had in the postseason. Now, Mark Madden is somebody who normally doesn't have a lot of great things to say when it comes to Mike Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And most of the times I just scroll past his articles because I just feel it's a bunch of unnecessary hate. But I think in this article, and I'm going to link it down in the description down below so you guys can read it, I feel this is one of the rare times that I actually somewhat agree with a little bit of what he says. Okay, now Mike Tomlin is a great head coach in the regular season. But when it comes to the playoffs, the Steelers have underperformed in that department. Now, I kind of think when it comes to the Mike Tomlin criticism of what has happened to the Pittsburgh Steelers in the playoffs, some of it is warranted, but some of it is not all on Mike Tomlin. Okay, now Big Ben hasn't performed great in the playoffs the last few times that he's been there. The last time Big Ben actually had a really good showing in the playoffs was probably 2015, 2016-ish. And then his recent couple of playoff appearances, he hasn't been great. So let's kind of look back on the Steelers' playoff history, right? So let's go back to 2011 when the Steelers were defeated by the Denver Broncos in the playoffs. Now, I remember this game verbatim. Pittsburgh had a pretty big lead, and I remember going back to my room taking a nap because I had a headache. Well, an hour and a half later, I remember my grandpa calls me into the living room, and he says, "Watch this, JT." So I'm already surprised that the game's in overtime. I'm like, how did Denver just come back? And then, first play of overtime, Tim Tebow gets a snap. He drops back with that ugly throwing motion, and he hits Demaryius Thomas, God rest his soul, on the sidelines. DT burns past the whole entire Pittsburgh Steelers defense, and the Steelers get upset by the Denver Broncos. So, for Mike Tomlin, I definitely feel that he deserves a good amount of criticism for that loss. Let's go to 2015, 2016, when the Steelers were defeated by the Denver Broncos in the divisional round. Now, a lot of you guys probably are not going to remember this name, but I definitely do. His name is Fitzgerald Toussaint, and he fumbled the ball really late into the game. And it allowed Denver to get back in it and pretty much win the game and complete or keep their Super Bowl run alive. And I don't really think that you can fault Mike Tomlin for that, because you got to remember, going into that matchup against Denver, Pittsburgh was without 2 of their top running backs. Le'Veon Bell was injured and D'Angelo Williams was injured. So Fitzgerald Toussaint was promoted from the practice squad. He had been on the practice squad for pretty much the whole entire season. He got moved up. He got his opportunity. And then when the game mattered the most is where he folded. And then he fumbled the ball. He gave it back to Denver. Denver would go on to win and then eventually win the Super Bowl. So I don't really think that it's fair to pin that all on Mike Tomlin, because at the end of the day, there has to be a line drawn between the coaches and the players just not going out there and executing. Now, let's go to the AFC Championship game when the Steelers got demolished by the New England Patriots. Now, I think that this is now the start of the Steelers' lack of success in the postseason that Mike Tomlin actually deserves a good amount of blame for. It was really disheartening to see Tom Brady just rip the heart and soul out of Steeler fans by just shredding Mike Tomlin's defense. I mean, Tom Brady threw 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. The Patriots were going up and down on the Steelers in the AFC Championship that year. And I was wondering, okay, when is Mike Tomlin going to make some adjustments? Because Tom Brady shreds Mike Tomlin's defense almost every single time they play. And you think that he would make some necessary adjustments, but it never seems as if he does. Now, I'm not going to say that Mike Tomlin is doing his job wrong, because there's a reason why I'm not an NFL head coach and I'm talking to you guys through this microphone, just giving you guys my thoughts. So I don't really know if he tries to make adjustments and they just don't work, but it just kind of doesn't make any sense for the Steelers to have the kind of talent that they had that year, to simply just get destroyed by New England the way they did. I just really couldn't accept it. And the Steelers were a better team than New England on paper. Mike Tomlin and his staff just got outcoached that year. But then this is probably the most embarrassing playoff loss in my opinion during the Mike Tomlin era in Pittsburgh. Losing to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Blake Bortles and company go on the road to Heinz Field in the divisional round. And going into that game, the whole storyline was, are the Steelers going to bounce back from the first encounter that they had with the Jacksonville Jaguars when the Jags defense ate up Big Ben? Big Ben was turning the football over. It was one of the worst games of his NFL career. So the Steelers go into that game and they get down early. Surprise, surprise. And then the Steelers fight back. But yet Mike Tomlin's defense had no answer for Leonard Fournette or Blake Bortles. Now, Mark Madden in this article says that Big Ben got outplayed by Baker Mayfield and Blake Bortles in those 2 games. I have to disagree with that. I don't think that Big Ben got outplayed by Blake Bortles. If you actually go back, you watch that game, Blake Bortles didn't really do that much. However, he did keep the drive alive for the Jacksonville Jaguars several times. He did enough to help Jacksonville get the victory. I wouldn't say that he outplayed Big Ben. I would just say that he did what he had to do. He was pretty efficient. He was a pretty good game manager that year. Then you go to the Browns loss, 2020. And this is probably a really bad look for Mike Tomlin, because he lost to an interim head coach. Kevin Stefanski wasn't able to coach that game. So, the Steelers get down 28-0 after the first quarter, and it looks like the game is already over. Now, I don't really know how much you can put the blame on Mike Tomlin for Big Ben choking the football up and turning the football over as many times as he did early. He had to snap that, went over his head into the end zone. It just was a mess. And you can say that sometimes Mike Tomlin doesn't have the Steelers buttoned up to play every week. There are some games that Pittsburgh loses that you kind of scratch your head and you wonder, okay, how in the world did the Steelers lose this game? So I kind of feel it's a mixed sword. And I feel that Mike Tomlin, if you're going to put criticism on him, you got to be fair with it. I don't think that it's fair to say that Mike Tomlin isn't a great coach, because over the last 3 years, there hasn't been a coach who has done more with less than Mike Tomlin. A lot of people ask this question every day. How did the Steelers make it to the playoffs with Big Ben regressing at the rate that he was over the last 2 years? And the reason for that is because of Mike Tomlin. There isn't no complex answer. There isn't no film analysis that has to be done. Mike Tomlin has been the sole reason why the Steelers have overachieved the way that they have year after year for over the last 3-4 years. Because if you go into almost every single offseason, right around prediction season, which is a little bit after the draft, everybody most of the time has the Steelers missing out on the playoffs. And every single year the Steelers have made the playoffs from 2020 to 2021. And the main reason for that is because of how great of a coach that Mike Tomlin is. However, I do feel that he does deserve a good amount of criticism for the Steelers' lack of success in the postseason. Okay? But at the same time, it's not all his fault like how Mark Madden tries to make it out to be. He also talked about how Mike Tomlin's defenses have allowed over 40 points in their last couple of playoff appearances. I mean, it's common sense. If your offense is turning the football over and giving the defense extra possessions that they have to be on the field, 9 times out of 10, they're going to give up a good amount of points. So the offense didn't do the defense no favors. They were turning the football over, and they weren't able to sustain drives. That's pretty much football 101. But Mike Tomlin is still a very good coach. Mike Tomlin is a top 5 coach because no other coach would be able to do what Mike Tomlin did in 2021 with the roster that he had. The Steelers had one of the worst rosters in the NFL last season, minus TJ Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick, and Cam Hayward. The roster really wasn't all that good. A lot of the players who stepped up for Pittsburgh last season, you probably didn't even know who they were prior. Ahkello Witherspoon, how many people knew who that was? Arthur Millette, I'm pretty sure nobody really knew who that was. And with one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. So, I do think that Mike Tomlin does get a fair amount of blame, but I don't really think that you can pin all of the Steelers' playoff woes all on Mike Tomlin. And I think that Mark Madden in this article does make some good points. But at the same time, I don't think that he's being fair in his analysis of Mike Tomlin, because at the end of the day, the players have to execute. And not one in this article did I see him say anything about Big Ben's terrible playoff performances. And I'm not even going to call them terrible. Lackluster playoff performances. Being reckless with the football, pretty much being Big Ben. You get what I'm saying? And Big Ben has always been a pretty reckless quarterback. He's always been a quarterback that takes a lot of risk. But over the last couple of seasons and the last couple of playoff appearances that the Steelers have had, he hasn't been great. And I definitely think that if you don't factor that in, you're kind of being a little bit of a hater in a sense. Because if you're going to make it far in the postseason, you got to have a quarterback that can take care of the football. We harp on Jimmy Garoppolo being the average to below average quarterback. But at least when he gets into the postseason, the 49ers can depend on him to take care of the football. That's one of the biggest keys when it comes to making it far in the playoffs. You have to have a quarterback that can take good care of the football and not give the opposing team's offenses extra possessions. So let me know how you guys feel about Mike Tomlin. Do you guys think that he deserves more criticism than what he receives for the Steelers' lack of playoff success over the last decade? Let me know down in the comment section down below. Thank you for listening to this video. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and check out the JT Sports Podcast, available on all podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, and Google Podcasts.